The Carthuan Imperium chose the worst possible moment to declare war on humanity. It was 11:43 a.m. Earth Standard Time. 5 minutes before lunch in Geneva. 3 minutes before happy hour on Mars. And precisely 30 seconds before Ambassador Helen Carter planned to excuse herself from the Galactic Concorde's emergency session to deal with a mild headache and a stronger espresso. Instead, she got a war. The Carthuan emissary unfurled himself at the center of the Concorde chamber like a weapon being unsheathed. 12 feet of plated muscle and ceremonial scars. His voice rolled through the amphitheater with seismic authority. By decree of His Radiant Excellency, Emperor Thraxus of the 9 Burning Suns, humanity is henceforth designated an existential destabilization threat. Effective immediately, the Imperium enters a state of total war. Gasps echoed from 100 alien delegations. Membranes fluttered. Fins bristled. Translation drones whirred frantically. The Carthuan did not posture. They annihilated. Carter glanced at her watch. Then she raised a hand. Clarification, she said evenly. The emissary tilted his armored head. You may beg. Not begging, Carter replied. Scheduling. The chamber quieted further. Does the war begin now? She asked. Or after lunch? For a moment, no one moved. A crystalline species in the upper tiers actually fractured from stress. The emissary's frill stiffened. You misunderstand the gravity of this moment. No, Carter said calmly. I understand perfectly. We've reviewed your military history. 612 campaigns. 0 negotiated settlements. You prefer orbital saturation and forced compliance. She folded her hands. I'm asking about timing. A low hiss rippled through the Carthuan delegation. War begins immediately. Carter nodded once, as if confirming a dinner reservation. All right, she said. We'll proceed. She tapped her wrist console. Ambassador? Her aide whispered. Notify Earth, Carter said. Protocol read. Phase 3. The aide swallowed. Already? Carter stood. They insisted. Across the galaxy, Carthuan war fleets were already moving. The Imperium did not announce war unless victory was mathematically certain. Their strategists had studied humanity for decades. Fractured politics, endless internal conflict, a species that argued with itself more than it cooperated. Soft. Divided. Yum. Admiral Vrask of the 7th Devastation Fleet watched Sol System bloom across his tactical display. Minimal defensive arrays detected, his operations officer reported. Sparse fleet signatures. Vrask flexed his claws. Predict surrender probability. 82% within 40 standard hours. Unacceptable. Vrask growled. Reduce it. His fleet translated from fold space in perfect formation, 3,000 warships blotting out the stars beyond Pluto. Sleek black hulls layered with phase armor. Planet-cracking cannons charging with dull crimson light. And then, nothing happened. No human fleet rushed to intercept. No desperate broadcast demanding negotiation. Earth rotated quietly in the distance. Blue. Peaceful. Vrask felt irritation. Advanced to firing range. The fleet glided inward like a blade drawn across silk. On Earth, in Geneva, Ambassador Carter finally sat down at a small cafe across from the Concorde building. She stirred her coffee. Status? She asked without looking up. Her earpiece crackled. 7th Devastation Fleet entering inner system. Right on time. Back in orbit near Jupiter, the first Carthuan bombardment lances ignited. 300 coherent plasma beams, each capable of boiling oceans, speared toward Earth. They never arrived. Halfway through transit, space spent. The beams fractured into cascading auroras, harmless ribbons of light that painted Earth's skies in brilliant color. In Kansas, a farmer squinted upward. Huh, he muttered. Thought they'd be bigger. On the Carthuan flagship, alarms screamed. Unidentified gravitational interference, an officer barked. Weapon cohesion disrupted. Vrask slammed a claw into his command dais. Locate the source. We cannot. It appears to be everywhere. Localized distortions across the entire system. And then, the stars behind them vanished. Fold space ruptured silently. Not ahead of the fleet. Behind it. Human ships emerged like industrial nightmares, blocky, armored, unapologetically functional. No elegant curves. No glowing spires. Just mass drivers the length of skyscrapers and armor layered thick enough to survive a sun's tantrum. Admiral Marcus Vale's voice cut across every Carthuan channel. This is United Earth Defense Command. You are trespassing. Vrask snarled. You were not detected. Correct. Your fold signatures. We don't use fold signatures, Vale said mildly. The first human volley fired. Kinetic projectiles the size of city buses accelerated to near-relativistic speeds. They didn't glow. They didn't hum. They arrived. The leading Carthuan dreadnought disintegrated, its shields collapsing too late to compensate for physics moving faster than reaction time. A second vessel split open like fruit under a hammer. Vrask roared. Return fire! Carthuan plasma cannons unleashed fury. Human ships exploded, some shattered under the barrage. But the debris did not scatter. It detonated inward. Microsingularities blossomed for fractions of seconds, crushing nearby Carthuan ships into twisted scrap before evaporating. Suicide reactors? An officer whispered. Vale's voice returned, almost bored. You brought overwhelming force. We brought contingency plans. More human ships appeared, this time inside the Carthuan formation. Silent apertures opening like invisible jaws. Boarding pods launched. They slammed into Carthuan hulls with violent precision. On the flagship, hull breach alarms howled. Vrask drew his command blade. Prepare for repulsion. The first pod punched through the bridge access corridor. Smoke poured in. Then came the humans. Not towering monsters. Not genetically modified giants. Men and women in scorched armor, moving with terrifying coordination. Bridge secured in 30 seconds, one barked. Carthuan guards charged, claws slicing. Shotguns thundered in confined space. At close range, evolution meant nothing against 12-gauge diplomacy. Vrask watched through tactical feeds as his warriors fell in pieces. Retreat, he commanded. Fold jump! Fold drives non-functional. Explain. Localized gravity distortions. Artificial wells anchored throughout the system. On the main display, vast structures shimmered into visibility around Sol, massive gravitic platforms hidden for decades among asteroids and debris fields. Cages. They had turned their own system into a trap. You expected this. Vrask breathed. Vale answered quietly. You've conquered every neighbor within range. We were next on your list the moment we achieved faster-than-light travel. You lured us. We prepared for you. The bridge doors exploded inward. Human marines flooded the chamber. Vrask charged. He moved like a storm, blade carving through two soldiers before a third tackled him with raw momentum. They crashed against the command dais. A human officer stepped forward, helmet removed. Mid-50s. Weathered. Calm eyes. Admiral Vrask, he said evenly. You should have waited until after lunch. Vrask lunged one final time. The officer fired once. Silence fell across the shattered bridge. Hours later, across the galactic concord, emergency transmissions flooded every channel. Carthuan fleets crippled. Slave worlds broadcasting rebellion. Imperium. Strongholds under coordinated cyber assault from human infiltration units embedded years prior. The unstoppable empire was bleeding. Ambassador Carter returned to the Concord chamber as panic consumed it. She approached the central podium. We did not seek this conflict, she said, voice steady. But we anticipated it. Behind her, live footage showed liberated worlds cheering as human transports delivered supplies instead of occupation forces. You believed we were divided, Carter continued. You mistook debate for weakness. Compassion for fragility. She paused. We are not unified because we agree, she said softly. We are unified because when someone threatens our home, we finish our arguments later. A silence settled across the chamber. We are still open to diplomacy, she added. Somewhere, deep in the Imperium's burning territories, human fleets advanced toward the Carthuan capital. Carter adjusted her glasses. But if you insist on war, she finished, understand this. Her eyes hardened. We learned long ago how to fight monsters. The Carthuan Imperium had never known retreat. For 6 centuries, their fleets advanced like an equation: input resistance, output extinction. Entire civilizations had folded at the mere rumor of their arrival. They conquered with mathematical precision and displayed the wreckage as policy. Now their 7th devastation fleet drifted in pieces across the Sol system, burning silently in the dark. And humanity did not pursue immediately. That was what unsettled the Imperium most. They waited. On the bridge of the captured flagship, Admiral Marcus Vale stood before the fractured viewport, watching debris scatter like metallic snow. The stars beyond shimmered through distortion fields still humming from the gravitic anchors. Status? He asked. 7th Fleet combat ineffective, replied Commander Ishan Rao. Survivors attempting sublight escape. Fold space still locked down. Let them run, Vale said. Rao blinked. Sir? Transmit their retreat vectors to every Carthuan border world. Vale's jaw tightened. Let their citizens see it. Psychological warfare wasn't glamorous. It was patient. On Earth, markets dipped. Politicians shouted. News channels screamed about invasion, heroism, betrayal. But something strange happened within 48 hours. The arguing stopped. Old rivalries paused mid-sentence. Nations that had spent generations snarling at one another quietly synchronized fleet commands. Supply lines merged. Manufacturing plants switched to wartime output without waiting for committee approval. The Imperium had expected panic. Instead, they triggered muscle memory. Humanity had always been bad at peace. But it had perfected war. Deep within the Carthuan core systems, Emperor Thraxus watched the casualty reports cascade across his throne chamber's hololith. Impossible numbers. He crushed a data slate in one claw. They are primitives, he hissed. They are adaptable, corrected High Strategist Varel carefully. And they anticipated preemptive aggression. Thraxus turned slowly. You suggest we were predicted? I suggest, Varel replied, choosing survival over pride, that humanity built its civilization expecting someone like us. Silence stretched. Then we escalate, the Emperor decided. Deploy the Purifier Array. Across 12 hidden installations, ancient Carthuan superweapons awakened. Stellar manipulation platforms capable of igniting solar flares intense enough to scour life from orbiting worlds. They selected their first target carefully. New Avalon. A human colony on the fringe, young, underpopulated, symbolically valuable. In the Concord chamber, emergency signals flickered as New Avalon's sun convulsed. Ambassador Carter didn't flinch this time. Phase 4, she said quietly. On New Avalon, Governor Luis Ortega watched the sky split open with violent coronal eruptions. Evacuation sirens wailed. Civilians rushed toward underground shelters. How long? Ortega demanded over comms. Solar mass ejection impact in 23 minutes. Ortega closed his eyes briefly. Get everyone below ground. Seal the vaults. Above the atmosphere, human defense platforms shifted orientation, not toward the sun, but beyond it. Space rippled. And something colossal moved through the distortion. The Carthuan had believed Sol's gravity cage was humanity's greatest trick. They were wrong. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't hidden in orbit. It was hidden in fear. A vessel emerged from fold space unlike anything the Concorde had catalogued. It dwarfed dreadnoughts. Its hull bore scars of deliberate asymmetry, layered plating interlocked like tectonic armor. Across its spine ran rail cannons measured not in meters, but kilometers. The name etched along its flank glowed faintly. UEFN Retribution. On the Carthuan Purifier Array Command Station, alarms erupted. Unidentified mass translation. Impossible displacement tonnage. The Retribution did not target the array directly. It targeted the star. Massive gravitic projectors flared along its hull, latching onto the destabilized stellar core. Human engineers had spent decades studying stellar dynamics, not to destroy suns, but to wrestle them. Stabilization field at 70%, a human technician shouted. On New Avalon, the sky dimmed. The violent flare collapsed inward, forced back by sheer artificial gravity. The purifier array stations hesitated. Then the Retribution fired. Its primary rail cannon discharged a projectile the size of a skyscraper wrapped in compressed antimatter shielding. It crossed astronomical distance in seconds. The first array station vanished in white. The second tried to retreat. It didn't finish charging. Within minutes, 12 ancient superweapons were expanding clouds of molten debris. On his throne world, Emperor Thraxus felt something alien. Doubt. They built a stellar interceptor, strategist Varel whispered. No, Thraxus said slowly, staring at the tactical projection. They built a message. The message arrived moments later. Admiral Vale's image materialized above the Imperial chamber floor. Scarred. Composed. You attacked a civilian colony, Vale said evenly. That was a mistake. You escalate beyond proportionality, Thraxus growled. Vale's expression didn't change. You started a war of extinction. Behind him, the Retribution loomed like judgment incarnate. We are capable of matching that, Vale continued. But we prefer not to. The Emperor's frill trembled with restrained fury. You think this display intimidates us? No, Vale replied. I think your citizens watching this broadcast might reconsider your leadership. Across Carthuan space, hacked transmission relays pushed the footage onto civilian networks. The unstoppable Imperium's secret weapons annihilated. Their fleets broken at soul. Their emperor arguing with a human admiral who sounded like a tired father disciplining a reckless child. The psychological fracture deepened. But Thraxus was not finished. Deploy the Blood Legions, he ordered. These were not fleets. They were shock armies, gene-enhanced Carthuan bred solely for planetary assault. Millions of armored warriors launched toward contested human colonies at sublight speeds, too dispersed for easy interception. If they could not win in space, they would drown humanity in bodies. On Mars, in the underground command center carved beneath Olympus Mons, Carter listened to the reports in silence. They're targeting population centers, Rouse said grimly. Simultaneous ground invasions across 8 worlds. Carter exhaled slowly. They want brutality, she murmured. She tapped her console. Release the footage from Anchorage. Rao hesitated. Ma'am, that's classified. Not anymore. Across human space, and across Carthuan networks still compromised by human cyber warfare, the video played. It showed something from 30 years earlier. First contact. Not the sanitized diplomatic version. The real one. A small Carthuan scouting force landing in Alaska before formal relations. A miscommunication. A warning shot fired. And the Carthuan response. Orbital strike. A coastal city erased in seconds. 10,000 civilians dead before humanity even understood who had attacked them. The Imperium had called it a navigational correction. Humanity had called it something else. The footage ended with a single image, a crater where Anchorage once stood. Carter's voice overlaid the silence. We tried diplomacy, she said quietly. We accepted apologies. We moved forward. A pause. But we never forgot. On every targeted colony, human defense forces braced as Blood Legion dropships tore through atmosphere like falling meteors. Carthuan warriors slammed into cities expecting chaos. They found trenches. Kill corridors. Urban landscapes deliberately reshaped over decades into defensive mazes disguised as civilian infrastructure. Old men and women stood beside younger soldiers, rifles steady. Humanity had not militarized visibly. It had simply never demilitarized internally. The First Blood Legion wave charged through the streets of New Dresden. They died in crossfire from elevated rail nests hidden behind apartment facades. On Horizon Station, Carthuan troops breached what appeared to be a hospital. The walls dropped away, revealing reinforced bunkers and automated turrets that shredded the invaders in seconds. Across 8 worlds, the same pattern repeated. The Blood Legions were fearless. Human defenders were patient. On the Retribution's bridge, Vale watched casualty reports scroll past. Heavy losses. But survivable. "Sir," Rouse said softly, "they underestimated us again." Vale nodded once. "They think war is about dominance." On Carthuan Prime, riots began to spark. Citizens questioned the Emperor's invincibility. Transmission leaks showed human forces fighting not for conquest, but survival. Thraxus stared at the spreading unrest. "Prepare my personal fleet," he snarled. "If they desire terror, I will deliver it myself." Back on Mars, Carter received the intelligence update. "The Emperor is mobilizing," Rouse said. She closed her eyes briefly. "Good," she whispered. "Ma'am?" Carter's gaze hardened. "He's finally coming to the table." The Emperor of the 9 Burning Suns did not travel lightly. When Thraxus left Carthuan Prime, he brought a fleet large enough to blot out a constellation. His personal armada was older than most civilizations, cathedral-sized warships layered in relic armor, escorted by carriers swollen with Blood Legion reserves and planet-killer escorts bristling with doomsday ordnance. He intended to end this personally. Not with distant bombardment. With spectacle. Across human space, long-range sensors tracked the incoming mass like a storm front rolling over the stars. On Mars, beneath kilometers of red rock and reinforced steel, Ambassador Helen Carter stood inside Olympus Command's central war room, hands clasped behind her back. The massive holographic projection of the Emperor's fleet rotated slowly before her. "Confirmed trajectory," she said. Commander Rao didn't look away from his console. "Direct path to Sol. No feints. No diversions. He wants Earth," Carter murmured. "Or you." She allowed herself a thin smile. "He can get in line." Out near Saturn, Admiral Marcus Vale watched the same storm approach from the bridge of the Retribution. The massive battleship drifted in silence, flanked by carrier groups and defense platforms hidden within the rings like patient predators. "Signal all units," Vale ordered. "Operation Homefront is active." Across the system, civilian traffic vanished into hardened shelters. Orbital habitats retracted into armored configurations. Asteroid mining stations shed their commercial facades, revealing missile arrays and rail batteries concealed for decades. Humanity had always claimed it disliked militarization. It had simply disguised it better than anyone else. The Emperor's fleet translated into Sol in waves of violent distortion. Space groaned as thousands of warships emerged in perfect formation. Thraxus stood upon the command dais of his flagship, the Oblivion Crown, watching the blue sphere of Earth shimmer in the distance. "So fragile," he murmured. "Human fleet formations detected near Saturn," an officer reported. "Destroy them." The first Carthuan assault wave surged forward. And then Saturn's rings exploded. Not outward. Upward. From within the icy debris field, thousands of human attack craft erupted like hornets from a shattered nest. Rail platforms anchored to tumbling asteroids ignited, launching kinetic storms into the Emperor's vanguard. Carthuan cruisers disintegrated under impacts they never saw coming. The Oblivion Crown's shields flared violently. "Ambush!" an officer shouted. Thraxus's eyes burned with fury. "Press forward!" He would not be denied by tricks. The second wave advanced, unleashing planet cracker torpedoes toward Earth. Vale's voice cut across every channel. "Retribution, primary batteries. Target Emperor-class flagship." The massive spinal cannon of the Retribution began to charge, energy coiling along its length like contained lightning. On Earth, civilians watched the sky flicker with distant flashes. News feeds were strangely calm now. There was fear, yes, but not panic. Anchorage had taught them something decades ago. Never assume the sky is safe. In orbit, the first planet cracker torpedoes met humanity's final surprise. They detonated prematurely. Inside each torpedo, hidden code activated. A failsafe humanity had planted years earlier. During the early days of peace, when trade agreements allowed limited technological exchange, human engineers had quietly contributed guidance algorithms to Carthuan weapons systems. Algorithms that contained a dormant line of code. A betrayal waiting for a trigger. On the Oblivion Crown, alarms shrieked. Planetary assault munitions malfunctioning! Thraxus spun toward his tech cast. Explain! Before they could answer, half his forward assault wing erupted in chain reactions as sabotage torpedoes detonated within their own launch bays. Vale didn't smile. He'd signed off on the infiltration program 20 years earlier. It had cost lives. Double agents executed in spectacular fashion once suspicion arose. But humans were very, very good at holding grudges. The retribution fired. The kinetic round crossed millions of kilometers in a blink. The Oblivion Crown's shields held for half a second. Then they collapsed. The projectile punched through 3 layers of relic armor, exiting the other side in a plume of molten debris. The Emperor staggered as his flagship shuddered violently. Damage report. Primary shields down. Structural integrity compromised. Thraxus roared, slamming a claw into the command dais. Close distance. I will tear their flagship apart myself. The Oblivion Crown accelerated, burning toward the Retribution in a suicidal charge. Vale watched the approach without blinking. Secondary fleets? He asked. Engaged across the perimeter. Heavy casualties both sides. Civilian zones? Secure. Vale nodded once. Then we finish this. The 2 flagships closed like ancient war gods preparing to collide. Carthuan escort ships threw themselves into the gap, absorbing human fire to shield their emperor. Many died willingly. Fanatically. The Retribution's armor peeled away under concentrated plasma lances. Entire sections vented into vacuum. Fires raged across internal decks. Boarding pods inbound! Rao shouted. Let them dock, Vale replied. Rao blinked. Sir? We've been waiting. The Oblivion Crown rammed the Retribution's flank in a catastrophic collision that rippled shockwaves across nearby space. Metal screamed. Hulls fused under extreme stress. Boarding corridors blasted open between the 2 titans. The Blood Legions charged across. They expected chaos. They found controlled darkness. The corridors of the Retribution had been depressurized deliberately. Artificial gravity flickered unpredictably. Kill zones activated in overlapping arcs. Human marines in mag-locked armor emerged from hidden bulkheads, weapons braced. Close-quarters combat erupted in brutal silence broken only by gunfire and the crack of bone. Vale moved through the smoke with a rifle in hand. Not as an admiral. As a soldier. He passed younger marines with steady nods. Hold the line, he said calmly. On the fused command decks between the 2 ships, the final confrontation unfolded. Thraxus tore through bulkheads with raw strength, carving a path toward the human command core. His armor was scorched, one eye blinded by shrapnel, but he radiated lethal intent. He burst into the central chamber where Vale waited. For a moment, they simply stared at each other through drifting smoke and sparks. You infect every system you touch, Thraxus growled. You destabilize order. Vale lowered his rifle slightly. We destabilize tyrants. The Emperor lunged. He moved faster than his size suggested, blade flashing in a lethal arc. Vale barely deflected, the impact sending shockwaves through his armored suit. They fought at arm's length, brute force against human adaptability. Thraxus overpowered him, slamming Vale against a fractured console. You could have been vassals, the Emperor hissed. Prosperous under our rule. Vale coughed, blood filling his mouth inside the helmet. We tried vassalage once, he rasped. Back when we had kings. He triggered the device in his palm. The floor beneath Thraxus vanished. A localized gravity well collapsed inward, dragging the Emperor off balance. Veil rolled clear as emergency bulkheads snapped shut around the containment field. Thraxus roared, trapped within a crushing sphere of artificial gravity that pinned him to his knees. Veil staggered upright, breathing hard. "You thought this was about pride," he said quietly. "It's about memory." Across Sol, Carthuan ships faltered as words spread. The Emperor captured. Not killed. Captured. On Carthuan Prime, unrest exploded into open revolt. The myth of invincibility shattered completely. Back in the shattered command chamber, Veil opened a direct channel to Mars. "We have him," he said simply. Carter's voice came through steady and cold. "Good," she replied. "Now we negotiate." The galaxy did not expect diplomacy to feel like this. Admiral Marcus Vale stood on the bridge of the Retribution, the Carthuan Emperor restrained in a containment field at the center of the chamber. His massive bulk filled the cage, claws scraping at the reinforced walls, mandibles clicking with impotent fury. Around him, human engineers and marines moved with precise choreography, securing evidence, mapping weak points, and monitoring Carthuan fleet signals still scattered across Sol. Vale's voice, calm and low, cut through the tension. "Open a secure channel to the Concord." A flicker, a shimmer, and Ambassador Helen Carter's image appeared, flanked by holographic projections of Earth, Mars, and several liberated colonies. Her expression was serene, unreadable, until she spoke. "He's yours to handle," she said. "Do not underestimate him. He's clever, ruthless, but contained." Vale nodded. "Understood. But containment isn't enough. He needs to see consequences." In the distance, Carthuan fleets remained in chaos, hesitant to advance, hesitant to retreat. Across the system, liberated colonies cheered quietly, aware that humanity's vengeance had been surgical, brutal, precise, but not indiscriminate. A message had been delivered. "Broadcast," Carter ordered. Humanity's finest cyber ops units flooded the channels, hijacking Carthuan public networks. Images of destroyed warships, collapsed superweapons, and the captured Emperor appeared on every screen across the Imperium. The visuals were accompanied by recordings of atrocities humanity had endured: the obliteration of Anchorage, centuries of occupation attempts, betrayals, and subterfuge. Thraxus watched his own image broadcast across thousands of systems from inside his containment field. Rage twisted his features, but for the first time, he felt something alien to his species: fear. Vale stepped closer. "You underestimated us," he said evenly, addressing the Emperor directly. "You assumed we'd fracture. You assumed we'd beg. You assumed we feared extinction." The Emperor spat, venomous. "You are a pest. A temporary annoyance. Your systems will burn, and your people will scatter." Vale shook his head. "You don't understand humans. We endure. We adapt. And when we strike, we don't just hit hard. We hit smart. And we don't forget." The Carthuan Emperor thrashed against the containment field. Vale's hand hovered over the tactical console. With a few keystrokes, he could annihilate Thraxus instantly. But he didn't. Because humanity was not about blind revenge. Humanity was about choice. Humanity was about proving something every alien empire had failed to comprehend: that strength tempered by intelligence, and yes, a capacity for mercy, was more terrifying than unchecked destruction. Across the Imperium, systems began to defect. Governors and admirals, previously loyal, sent signals requesting parley. They had witnessed the destruction, the capture, and the sheer audacity of a species that had been dismissed as primitive. They had understood something their emperor had not: humans fought with the ferocity of instinct and the cunning of strategy. And they fought not for conquest, but for survival and principle. Vale turned to Carter's image. "Shall we begin negotiations?" Carter's eyes glimmered, sharp with satisfaction. "Yes. But let them understand the cost of miscalculation." The first wave of Carthuan envoys arrived, trembling but alive. They brought proposals, treaties, and apologies, all carefully crafted to preserve what remained of the Imperium while acknowledging humanity's newfound dominance. Vale allowed a slow, grim smile. Send them in. And have their Emperor witness every minute. Thraxus bellowed, but the sound fell flat across communication relays. The galaxy was listening, and for the first time, the narrative of invincibility was broken. As humans began to negotiate, they did so on their terms. Colonies were liberated. Reparations demanded. Trade agreements rewritten. Strategic restrictions imposed. And everywhere, the underlying message was clear: underestimate humanity at your peril. Back on Mars, Carter finally exhaled, sitting down with a modest lunch. Her aide looked concerned. You're actually eating? I am, she said, slicing into a sandwich. We just won a war, and taught an empire a lesson they'll remember for millennia. After lunch seems appropriate. Vale watched the news feeds and holographic updates from the Retribution. The galaxy was in shock. Entire alien civilizations had misjudged humanity, and now the Imperium itself was a cautionary tale broadcast system-wide. Yet beneath the triumph, there was awareness. Humanity's victories had come at a cost. Hundreds of soldiers lost, systems devastated, trust shattered. But every loss had been calculated, every strike surgical, every message precise. Humanity had fought like humans, flawed, determined, clever, and terrifying when underestimated. Finally, Vale allowed himself a moment of reflection. He glanced at the captured Emperor, who now sat slumped in his containment field, defeated but alive. A symbolic gesture that would haunt Carthuan history. Remember this, Vale said softly, speaking to the empty bridge. The next time someone declares war on us, we'll already be waiting. Carter's voice echoed through the communication channel, faintly amused. And hopefully, they'll wait until after lunch. The Retribution's engines powered up. Human fleets repositioned in orbit around liberated worlds, establishing defenses and contingencies. The galaxy, for all its complexity and history, had learned something that would echo across centuries. Humanity was not merely resilient. Humanity was unpredictable, cunning, and relentless. And the lesson was simple: never schedule war around lunch with a human. Far beyond Sol, the Emperor of the 9 Burning Suns sat in his cell aboard the Retribution, his rage simmering into bitter calculation. But even he, a master of conquest, had to admit something he would never voice aloud. Humans were terrifying not because they wielded weapons, but because they thought differently, struck decisively, and remembered every slight. The galaxy was quieter now, listening, waiting, watching. And humanity, at last, had proven the most dangerous lesson of all: underestimating them was a universal mistake. Carter took another bite of her sandwich. Vale leaned against the console, a faint smirk on his face. The war was over for now. But the story of human cunning, patience, and ruthlessness had only begun. And somewhere in the stars, every empire knew the truth: humanity had arrived. The lunch break, as always, was optional, but never negotiable.